Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Holistic Health Expert Interview Series. I am your host, Audrey Butler, health coach and nutritionist. Excuse me. Today we have Chani Birkner with us from Cords of Light. Welcome, Chani.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to share what you have to say with our listeners. There's been a few friends that I've kind of said, guess what? I'm doing this interview. You don't want to miss it. As I tell them a little bit about it, their eyes light up and they make sure that they are in the loop to hear it. So from the feedback I've gotten from a few friends, I know everyone else is really going to love it.
Oh, good. It's one of my favorite topics. I'm very excited to share it.
So let me introduce Chani a little bit. She is the CEO and founder of Cords of Light, and she has been helping others to find inner confidence, learn communication patterns, and protect themselves energetically for 14 years. She's worked with Dr. Neil and Sherry Logan to create a new and effective technique for communication, healing, and self-mastery. She has given lectures on various topics over the last 12 years and loves helping others gain an understanding of principles that will empower their lives. She's married to Scott Birkner and lives with their 6 children in Cedar City, Utah. That's amazing. I love it. And as I've been talking with her and learning more about her, you come from a family that has tried to live healthy and unique lives a little bit. So you're kind of a second generation pioneer in this field.
Yeah, my dad is a chiropractor, and so my whole life we were growing up with vitamins, and he would always try things out first before he'd recommend them to his patients. And so any kind of new diet that was supposed to be the new healthy thing, right? So we've done it all. We know it all. You know what I mean? And so over the years, there's been some things that consistently stuck and some things that didn't last very long. So,
right.
So we know how to experiment and that you have to find what's perfect for you.
That's right. And your mom, what was it that she was an expert in?
So my dad, she loves people and communication. So in college, she went to communication classes, and she just was so interested in so many things. She changed her major like 7 times, and they finally told her she had to stop changing her major because of her interest. And so when my dad is a doctor, a chiropractor, and he would be working with his patients, and he noticed that that he could treat them all day long, but if the underlying reason why they were in pain was not physical, if it was emotional, it didn't matter how much he treated them, they weren't healing. And he's always very concerned about making sure his patients actually heal, right? He's not one of those that wants you to stay sick so that you keep paying him. So he asked her to go, he heard of this technique called NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. And so he sent her to go do that because he didn't have the time to do that sort of.
Oh, I love that.
Communication. So she studied it. And this was back early 80s before they were doing certifications and stuff. So she really learned that in depth. And then over the years, that turned into them developing more and more into their own style, into their own everything. And because my mom homeschooled us, so she was very focused on the family dynamics, on children communications and individual communication. So for us, it's a holistic approach, right? We don't just want you to know yourself, but how your family works, how you interact with your family, how that impacts every area of your life. So when I started Cords of Light, we kind of started from the the emotional healing side because that's what people were asking for. But we wanted to really give you the breadth of what we have to offer. And so that's when we started really pushing, like explaining the connection styles, which is so much more than just emotional healing. So,
oh, how neat. So tell us, what are these connection styles?
You've probably heard about them before. We termed it connection styles because it goes a lot deeper, but they are the basic ways your conscious mind communicates with your subconscious mind. And that happens through feelings, through visualization or pictures, and through words or thoughts, right? And the 3 ways, we call them vision, mind, and heart. And each of us access all three of them, but we usually communicate strongly with our subconscious mind through one or two of those at a time, and sometimes we operate primarily from one of those areas in one area of our life, and then we operate from it in another. Like my dad, he's very heart-centered. Feelings are important to him, and he gets things through feelings. But as a doctor, when he's in his practice, he's very mind-centered. As a doctor, he was working with those patients and using words and communicating to them mind to mind. So kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah. Can you give us an example of each of the three styles?
Yeah, absolutely. So vision is everything that you see. As someone who is primarily communicates visually, the things that they see are so important. They'll look up a lot. They tend to see the detail that they see in their pictures. They think in pictures, like literally think in pictures. And I've heard a lot of people say that everybody thinks in pictures. I don't think in pictures. I think in feeling. I feel in feelings, and then those feelings create pictures if I move it up to that level. But for a visual person, they literally think in pictures or movies. And so when someone is very descriptive, the literal vision of that pops in their head. My sister, Kia, is primarily visual vision oriented. And one of the funny things is my sister, who is not at all, would say things like, well, that's a mental picture, right? When, when someone's describing something else and you're like, oh, but she wouldn't see it, but she knows if she said a mental picture, my sister Kia would be like, oh no, and she'd cover her eyes, but it was in her mind, right? The picture. So that is vision. Is just it's kind of up here too, like it's up here.
Okay.
And then mind is words and like it's very hearing centered. So they can hear voices in their head that they're talking to back and forth, right? Your subconscious mind has a response, and it's in words. You can hear the words as they're talked back to you, and then you can talk back to it. You know what I mean? It's pretty fun. So it doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just how you're talking to yourself. And those words, sometimes they even see the word spelled out. So if I was saying pink elephant, like a vision-oriented person would see the picture of a pink elephant, but the mind-oriented person might hear the word, and the word is what is the focus. Or they might even
actually see it spelled out, P-I-N-K.
Yeah, they might actually see the word spelled out. Words are extremely important to a mind-centered person.
How does that relate to spelling? Are they better at spelling?
We all, because of how we do it, each of the three types can be just as good as the other. So what would happen is that for a mind-centered person, they would probably say something, well, like, that doesn't sound right? Or they might look at it and be like, they know something's off about it. A vision person would look at a misspelled word and be like, that doesn't look right? To them, the visual cue shows something off. For a mind-centered person, they would know it wasn't spelled right. Does that make sense?
Okay.
For a feeling person, the heart-centered person, they'd look at it, they'd see it, but they would feel that something was off about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So give us more an example of the feeling.
Right. So a heart-centered person, they think and work through everything by feeling. Now, in this case, feelings are different from emotions. All three of the connection styles, we also have emotions, and emotions are separate. This is more how we process, how we think through things, how we work with our world. So for a heart-centered person, and it is often hard for people who are primarily mind or vision to understand, but feelings are different from emotions. And we'll feel in our heart, and the feeling brings information, but it takes time to understand that information because we have to feel it and then kind of move it up and to explain it, which can be difficult sometimes because the other two styles are faster, right? Because the words provide the information. And so it's almost instant knowledge that's given. And for a vision, like a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that's very true. So the struggle with the vision is trying to describe to you what they're seeing, but they see it so quickly. Where a feeler has to take these feelings and then add words and pictures to try to explain those feelings. So
Yes.
It can take a
Interesting.
little bit longer.
So how can we use these in our relationship with our spouse, with our kids, with our coworkers?
Well, if you know how you primarily operate, sometimes we cast a lot of judgment on ourselves or on other people when they are operating at a different level than we are. One is that if you understand how you work primarily, you can then develop and learn to tap into the others to add depth and strength to who you are and give you that ability to connect with people on the different levels. So as a parent, if I had a child who was a mind more oriented child, one is I can work to connect with them more in mind, and that helps develop my ability to connect to my mind center, because we use them all. Everyone's subconscious brain works with it, but at the same time, you can help them tap into that connection. It helps you connect with your kids. It helps you. That's why we call it connection styles, because it helps you connect with everyone and everything, and learn how you get that connection. For me, because I'm heart-centered, I'd say feeling. That connection feeling comes to me when I know how to connect with them, whether it's through their mind, through their vision, or through their heart. But for a mind-centered person, they would almost like know that the connection is there. And for a vision-oriented person, they might even see this like cord of light connecting them. You know, that there's this connection, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And
Yeah.
if you become aware that maybe your child connects predominantly, let's say heart-centered or vision-centered, do you then try to connect with her in that way? So let's say she's a very vision-oriented person. Once you know that, do you try to connect with her visually?
Yes, I try to do both, because the goal is for you to be connected the way that you're connected, and for them to be connected the way they are, because
So it's two-way.
two ways.
Oh.
So as a parent, I know that I need to feel that heart-to-heart connection. And so, but it allows us to focus on that. So I can hold her. One of the things we like to do in our family is we call it connecting our hearts. We'll be like, from my heart to your heart, and we touch hearts, and back and forth. But also it means that when, so I have one daughter who's 4, and she is what we call an internal vision, meaning that she sees more in her head, but it all takes place inside her head. So she's quieter, because often vision people seem to be more outgoing, more loud, because they just have these pictures, but there's an internal version that's quieter. So a lot of times people would think she was predominantly heart, just because feelers tend to be slower. They look down more, they're more reserved. But not all of them. I know a lot of outgoing feelers too, but so she was, as a baby, I had a really hard time connecting with her. She's the only one of my kids that I worried about that connection, because I loved her, but I didn't feel that, most babies you connect with almost instantly. They're put in your arms and there's this bond there. And I didn't have that for her for about 3 months. And I was trying to figure it out, how to get it. And I realized that she had those really old eyes, and every time she'd look at you, she wanted to have this eye connection as an infant. So I laid down next to her and I just looked in her eyes, and I looked in her eyes for a good 10, 15 minutes. And all of a sudden that deep connection, it was there, I was like, oh, she's a vision. We needed to have that together. And so for a vision oriented person, eye contact is everything.
Oh, that's key.
It's key. And so if you if you or your spouse are vision oriented and you're trying to get your children to always make eye contact with you, you could come into a lot of problems, because a heart-centered child doesn't always make eye contact to express their deepest emotions. They're probably going to be looking down and feeling these emotions. And if you make them look up, it cuts off the depth of what they're trying to share with you. Wow. So that's actually really key, is if your child is not primarily vision, if they're more heart-centered, a lot of people are like, oh, you're avoiding eye contact, that means you're lying. It doesn't always mean the child is lying, because if they're mind-centered, they may be defocusing to try to bring the words and explain. If they are heart-centered, they're looking down and trying to feel the feelings enough to explain them to you. So that's a big key too, is that sometimes let the child look down, and then But at the same time, it's also powerful to use the eyes, right? Because when we look up, our brain accesses the 3 levels depending on where we look. So if you have a heart-centered child who's looking down and then looking up and then looking down, but they never say anything, you might want to stop them right in the middle and have them look at you, because that's the mind level where the words actually come out, and say, okay, now talk to me. And you'll find that they'll have a much better time, because if they're looking down and then looking up, they're feeling the feelings and seeing the picture, and feeling the feelings and seeing the picture, but the words come here at the middle level. So
wow, fascinating.
So if they've had enough time to process and see, and you see that they're kind of stuck, that's when you're like, okay, let's bring you into the mind level so you can communicate.
Wow. So this is bringing to mind things like, personality styles or the love languages or things like that. Can you tell us maybe some distinguishing characteristics between those?
Right, absolutely. I love personality stuff. I love the love languages. And the difference between the connection styles and personality and the love languages is that this is how we connect with the subconscious mind and how we communicate with it. And you are not a one-dimensional person, right? In a lot of personality things, they're like, this is your personality, you can't change it, or whatever. But this is like, no, this is how the brain works, and you can develop and increase your abilities over time. And the goal is to be kind of well-rounded in all of them and use them appropriately for the situation that you're in, And so while there's a lot of things that are fun about somebody who is dominant in an area, it doesn't mean they can't learn and access the other areas as a skill. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it is more how you think and how you process, then it's not personality at all. However, there tends to be things that are linked to personalities that are actually brain language or communication. Yeah. And if you start paying attention, it's everywhere. That people have taken how the brain operates and then they've connected it to learning, and they call them, here's how you learn, right? We all know the auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learning. So this is it's the same because it's how the brain operates. So we take it into, it's not just how you learn, it's how you connect to everything around you, because your brain processes all the information around you. It knows your connections with your family. It knows your connection with your friends, with yourself, And so it's running everything in the background, trying to do everything for you that it thinks you want. But what if you have miscommunicated to yourself what you want? Well, then you have to communicate with yourself in a better way to make it how you want it. So it's part of that skill. It encompasses everything that you do.
How interesting. Sounds like it definitely takes a little bit of practice and knowledge to, one, recognize what's going on, and then 2, figure out how you can optimize and strengthen areas that you might
Oh, absolutely.
a little weak in.
I mean, I've known this most of my life, and I was talking so my mom helps me teach this because she's been doing it for so long too, and we were laughing, and her friend, our friend Jaylyn. So the 3 of us are teaching it together because Jaylyn is a vision, and my mom is a mind-oriented, and I'm heart-oriented. So we kind of get that
perfect
perspective. So we try to teach it all together, and but it's fun because even though you learn and develop the other ones, you still tend to start from your strength, right? And then go into the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so even knowing these things, my mom will still ask my dad what he thinks about something, right? And think is mind level. And that's where she operates and lives, and she can operate fast from there. But if you're a feeler and you have to move into the other one, you can just go in circles, right? Because the confirmation, the really true knowing comes in your more dominant. And so he'd be like, and he would never say anything. And she'd like, okay, wait. How do you feel about it? And so it's just changing the word, but it gives him permission to go, into his feelings. It goes, I feel okay. Let's go do that. Right. So you can if you're part of your frustration in your relationship is the speed, like your ability to make faster decisions. If you speak to them in their primary, it tends to be a faster resolution than if it's, it's not. But
so it sounds like there's kind of some vocabulary that can give us clues to how people are operating. So you just said, how do you think, what do you think about this? And then changed it to, what do you feel about this? And then, you know, I guess if your vision, you'd say something like, well, how do you see that?
Right, exactly. And then they'll respond so fast. But if you ask, and we have to, part of this knowledge is that we have to then trust that their feelings are the same as our thoughts or our vision, and vice versa, right? So
Oh, rather than saying, well, my way is better because,
right.
you know.
If your spouse is primarily mind and you're primarily feeling, and you're going to them and saying, here's how I feel about something, and they're like, well, that's great, but what do you think? To them, what you think is more important than what you feel. But to a feeler, what you feel is more important than what you feel.
They put more weight on it.
They put more weight on it. So we then learn to put equal weight on each other's primary motive. So if you've ever watched Pride and Prejudice, have you seen that really long one? You know, where Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy have that confrontation, and he's like, here's my feelings, and I've overcome them, and I love you. My feelings for you are more important than all my logical thinking issues, right? So in a feeler, the feelings were more important. They overcame every objection, and he's now proposing, and she is auditory. She's the mind, and she's like, how dare you tell me that you love me? Your love is not as important as the fact that as a intelligent man, you can't stand my family, you can't stand my friends. You know what I mean? Like she's
more
like
mind oriented.
Yeah, it's like this classic miscommunication.
Oh, that's a great example. I love it.
It's fabulous. And then of course they figure it out later. But when you watch that show, the actors are so amazing because you can even see in their poses and their body languages that he is a deep feeler, right? And everything is like, and then when he explains to her what shocks him the most is her feelings about it. Doesn't matter how he proposed, she would never have, because he gave her such bad feelings, when for her it was logically that she could never. Anyway, it's just funny.
Right. That is amazing. So as a nutritionist and health coach, I deal a lot with food. How can we use these connection styles with our connection to food and what we eat?
Right. When we're trying to be healthier, it really, really helps to really connect with ourselves. So what works for me is I like things to feel good. For comfort food, I find that I can, if I feel like it feels good so I pay more attention to how my body feels when I eat things. You know what I mean?
Would that be how it feels both in your mouth, or more just how you feel afterwards, or both?
Right. Texture is really important to me. And I like soft textures, and I like, but I also like warmth. Sometimes if something is warm, then it's more appetizing to me. For me, I recently went gluten-free again. I mean, I do things on and off again. And so last night I was at a party, and they had some of my favorite sandwiches, and I was going to be so good, but I ate them. And I really, like, today I'm paying for it, and I'm like feeling my gut, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, body. I feel so bad. I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean? As I'm talking to my body about how bad I feel because I, had a moment of weakness. And so recognizing that, helps me be more consistent, because I'm like, I don't want to feel bad, because for me,
the next time you have that temptation, if you can remember how you felt after, then that will be a big motivation for you.
Yeah, huge motivation. Also finding things, because I like to feel comfort. So when I'm stressed, I do find more comfort in food, and there's comfort foods. Mm-hmm. So finding something that can replace the feeling of comfort in the diet that I'm in, or whatever kind of mode of things. So as far as gluten-free, if I want the comfort of bread, then I love the sourdough, because the true, real sourdough bread that's been, fermented and everything, my gut has no problem with that. So then I'll go to that. Or I find a really good way, because it's so hard, I don't do it all the time, but my sister-in-law made this amazing gluten-free mix that when she makes biscuits, it tastes like biscuits or whatever, but it's better for me. So there's that. And when we were going more, we did paleo for a while. So when I did paleo, I found a way to make like a dark chocolate mousse out of the coconut
cream.
the coconut cream.
Mm-hmm.
And we put the dark chocolate in there with just a tiny bit of honey. And eventually we just did the pure dark chocolate because I'd eat it with strawberries,
Oh, so
with fruit, and so that was the comfort satisfying, and it was so good and it was wonderful.
oh, you're making me hungry just talking
Right?
about it.
So you have to find those things because then it brings the joy into, I personally feel like you should still have joy in your process.
Oh, absolutely. How about a visual person? How would they approach food?
So my husband is vision, and he really, really, really likes how it looks. He likes if it has color, right? So flavor is important, but visually he likes
If it doesn't look appetizing, he's not going to even want to try it.
Look at it. He's like, yeah, that doesn't look good, and then he moves
Right.
on to something else. So figuring out how to make it visually appealing to you, and however that is, that's really important. It's also important for you to see progress. For a vision person, if they can't look in the mirror and see progress, it's very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. So it'd be, for a feeler, we're more like, okay, my pants feel less tight. So we can notice the feelings of our clothes on our bodies as we're working towards change. For a visual person, they're going to want to look in the mirror and see progress. So helping them notice, maybe having them take a before picture and have them look and see even a little bit of a difference, or measure so they can see the numbers go down. You know what I mean? Something like that would be really helpful to stay on target so that they can see their progress. For my husband, that's been, and usually we look better in the mornings when we wake up before at the end of the day. So I would encourage a vision-oriented person to look in the mirror in the morning and tell themselves how great they look every day, instead of at night, because at night we're kind of like, and our whole body has that, we're just tired. And so everything looks heavier in the evening.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
So
if you're a mind or a knowledge oriented, let's talk about that.
They really need to keep track of the numbers, so that they know where they're at. Looking in the mirror isn't as important to them. Feeling it does give them knowledge, but they're probably more the ones that are going to be really motivated by the numbers on the scale than
how about even just numbers from scientific studies, or the reason why these foods would be nourishing to me because they have all the antioxidants and polyphenols. Would they be more motivated by that kind of knowledge?
Yeah, they'd be more motivated by the knowledge that what they're eating is good for them. I mean, my mom, she can eat the same thing for every meal. She just knows it's good. And sometimes everybody needs those comfort foods or whatever, but knowing that she can have it and that it's still good for her is really important. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it's the knowledge, it's the understanding, and sometimes they need to get extremely detailed on those nitpicky numbers. A lot of mind-oriented people do really good at tracking calories, counting those, because it's the knowledge of where they're at on the scale. I can't do that. I'm like, I don't care. I just want to feel good. I want my pants to fit. So I'm more that way. And if you ask me, so I like diets. I like health things that don't make me track the amount of food I'm eating.
I see. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I like that.
Well, but my friend who is more mind-oriented, she tracks and they revel in it. They love it. They keep really good records. I don't keep very good.
How interesting. How about for children or some that might be a little bit of picky eaters? How would this knowledge help us introduce foods to them in a way that fits their connection style?
So if they're pickier eaters, it might just be how it looks. And I have a lot of children. I have 6 children. So if I had to cater to each one individually to make them eat something, it'd be very difficult. But you can work with it. I'm like, well, either you eat it or you don't. But I also have alternatives for them, which kind of helps. But you can make things more visually appealing for little kids, like cut it out in a different shape. Like your vision kids are going to be all over that. And also sometimes for kids, things get boring. So you present it in a new way. It excites them. As they get older, having them be part of the process of making the food is really I know as a parent, sometimes you're like, but it's going to make a mess. I don't want to do it.
Right.
But, my 6 and 8-year-old, they can use knives and they'll cut the fruit, they'll cut the vegetables and
Sure.
so
Yeah.
that helps, I think. But if you know what it is, if it's the texture, you can try to figure out how to make the texture better. If it's it's the other, or what we do is we just have an alternative. If you have to at least try it, but then you can make this other. But our caveat, because we're such a big family, is that if you make it for yourself and one of your siblings wants it, you have to make it for them too.
Right, because you've opened Pandora's box.
Right. Suddenly everyone's like, but that's leftover. I like that better. And everyone wants it. So then they have to split it up among whoever wants it. And if there's one serving it, means that they have to figure something else out.
Right, right.
So you can use the connection styles for food. It's just a little harder, especially if you've got a large, because, a lot of us have, if you have one child, you can really cater to that child. If you have multiple children, you kind of have to have this general rule, but still be understanding about what they need and try to incorporate that into your meal or into your availability of other options. My friend she has 5 kids, and one of her sons is extremely mind-oriented, and he likes very specific things only. So she knows if they're going to do spaghetti, she's going to give it to him without the sauce and with butter and Parmesan. You know what I mean? And so that's just a choice that they've made, because he won't eat it any other way. But if they're at somebody's house and he won't eat it, then they just say, then you have to wait till we get home and then make yourself a sandwich. Or so they do have this other option that is his consistent. One of my nephews or cousins, I was 16, I was at her house, and he only ate chicken nuggets like for every meal. That's all he would eat. And so the mom, she figured other things to put around them, but that was his primary source for a couple of years. And I think that picky eaters seem to be biggest like at 6, between 4 and 6.
There's definitely an age range, yeah. Starting, sometimes as young as 3, but between 4 and 6 for sure, things start to shift. And it's hard for parents because before that, kids tend to be really good about exploring and eating almost anything, unless they have, sensory issues or other special needs that factor into it. And then suddenly they go into this phase where everything they used to eat, they don't like anymore. And
you're like, what happened? Right? I could just put anything in front of you and you'd make a mess, but you ate it.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's something too, is that then you do the sneaky parent things, like you blend the vegetables and throw them in the spaghetti sauce so they don't know, or you know what I mean? Or you chop up the onions so that they're so small they don't complain about them. So it's okay. I have no problem doing parent sneaky things to get the good nutrition in the kids.
Yeah, and my rule with that is always, if you know that they're not going to notice when you put it in, then go for it. But if you know that they are and that you are being sneaky, then be upfront about it so that you keep that parent-child relationship integrity.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to make a judge whether or not, because if you're going to ruin their favorite food, then it breaks that trust they have with you.
Yeah.
But if you know that it will hide it well and they won't notice, then go for it. I use my blender and my food processor a lot for
yeah.
for
and
that.
we found for our kids too, and sometimes you just have to go, what is the most important thing in this? Has he eaten peanut butter and jelly sandwiches so much it's time to give him some real food, so we found using shakes was really effective for breakfast, because we could put in the nutrients into the shake, between and we can add things to make it taste good and then still get that nutrition in to them, especially for kids, for all of us. But sometimes there's behavioral issues that come from a lack of nutrition. And so we usually put some sort of a simple protein in there, or some simple.
Yes, I love smoothies. It can be a vehicle
because they feed the brain
in there.
Yeah. So the most important thing for us is to make sure that the brain gets fed, because otherwise we have other struggles, and however we get it to them. And I don't feel as guilty about sugar if I can make sure that it's also delivering the other things.
Especially if it's a whole fruit sugar or something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you throw the fruit in there, or even a little bit, or honey. I love raw honey or whatever. Yeah. So.
It's
As long as
true. We have to be creative as parents. It's very true.
you do. And you do have to be, so for a visual child, if the shake is a yucky green color, they might not. So
or brown.
but if it's chocolate, it can be brown, right? So
True.
sometimes I've used chocolate because chocolate covers up a lot of flavors and it's supposed
And
to
colors.
be brown. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I think that's a great idea as far as that goes.
If you need it smooth, get a really, really good blender. We use a blend tech and it makes things smooth no matter what we put in there, which is great. So for textured kids, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, very true. So I wanted to touch on two other areas before we end, and that was time management and how our relationship with time, and the other one is goal setting. I know you have some really valuable insights on those two things.
Right. So separate from our connection styles, we also are developing our online version of our class. We've taught this for 30 years between me and my mom's taught it forever, right? So we also operate time different. And there's two main ways we operate time. And we can get in a lot of conflict with ourselves and people around us depending if we operate time differently. And there's kind of two areas of time. And one is how we do like our day-to-day. Do we follow the clock or do we focus on projects during our day? Those are the two different time ones. But then there's also for goal setting, especially when we're talking about health and trying to reach our health goals, there's three main areas. There's past, present, and future focused people. So if you're a past focused person, it may be more effective when you're looking at goals to focus on maybe how you were in the past and wanting, if you're like, oh, I want to be how I was at my wedding day, that might be effective for you. For me, as a future-oriented person, that wouldn't be effective for me. Does that make sense? To try to
Right, it has no motivational value.
Already been created. Yeah. So for me, so then for a present-oriented, also remember there's this window of reality, and that's why we're really talking about this, is because for a present-oriented person, their window of reality is today, and they may be able to extend it a few weeks or even a few days. My husband has a very short window of reality, and his is like 3 days. We're leaving tonight for a trip, and yesterday he started talking about what he's packing, where I've already had it planned for days, right? But all of a sudden it's real to him, and it's like, okay, what are we going to pack to leave tomorrow? So if you are a more present-oriented person, you're going to need to make sure your goals are very short-term because that's when they're real to you. So if you're like, okay, by the end of the year, I want to be a size 6, that's forever away. That means you can mess up all day long today all you want because you have this, wealth of time available to change things. Mm-hmm. So instead you need to say, my goal in 3 days is to reach this level of fitness or health. And so you need to take your big goals and make them very small into your reality time frame, and then that motivates you and gets you really excited and keeps you really excited because it's real. It's not.
And then a year later you do have it, but it almost feels like a surprise. It's like, oh, here I am. Look at that.
Here I am, because I've done these little things. So when they talk about taking big goals and breaking them into little chunks, you need to make them small enough to hit your window of reality. My dad's window of reality is about a week to 3 weeks. And so he can have like a 3-week goal, hits that 3 weeks, and he can stay excited about it and maintain that excitement for about 3 weeks. My husband's window of reality is stretching it a week, but it's 3 days is the real reality. And so when he was working really hard to become physically fit, he had to make goal like he had to make like a weekly goal, because then he could see, as a vision person, he could see to the end of the week, right? Monday to Friday or whatever it was, you know what I mean? And so then he could push himself to that goal for the end of the week. But if it was 3 weeks away, he then had kind of more, it wasn't as real. It was still kind of real, but it wasn't as real. His real operating window is a week or less.
Right. And then future-oriented people are the planners, the long-term.
Right. Long-term planners. And so your window of reality is actually in the future. Today doesn't matter as much as what's going on in the future. So if you're, and that can be anywhere from a few months to a year. My mom can plan a year and a half in advance I'm not that far into the future. I'm more like 3 to 6 months in the future, but I can, that's where my goals today are because this is what I want, right? And this future is so real to me that I do things today in order to get that.
So are they better at saving and postponing gratification and things like that?
They tend to be, but it also means that when the reality today is so different from what it has to be in order, so they have that kind of sense of, if I'm planning on going to Disneyland in 6 months, but right now I'm not meeting my bills, right? That goal isn't going to be met, right? Because the reality today has that but there's enough time that if they focus on the goal, they can kind of work with the idea that, well, maybe I need to do something else to make an income. You know what I mean? They have that wiggle room, but it can, as they get closer and closer to the goal and it hits a shorter time frame, they may have a hard time seeing that it's possible to meet it because there's not enough time. Does that make sense? And it can cause them to fall apart. So they could be falling apart and there's still 3 weeks, where for a more present-oriented person is like, there's still 3 weeks. There's plenty of time for things to change. But for a future-oriented person is like, it's all over 3 weeks and we haven't met our goal. You know what I mean? So that can be a weakness. And so it takes a lot of what if then you'd be like, okay, maybe it's time to set another goal further out while I'm still hoping this one happens so that I maintain my perspective, my energy, whatever it is I need to do.
That's so interesting. Mm-hmm. I love that. That is just so essential. Just back up a little bit, back to the time-oriented. So where you have time-oriented or project-oriented.
Yes. So time-oriented means that you naturally track and interact with time. You think in terms of minutes, hours, half hours. So it means that when you're trying to do something, you have this innate knowledge of this is how long it should take. And then you get frustrated if it takes longer than that. If you're project-oriented, you have no sense of time. You have a sense of whether or not it's a big project or a little project, but you really don't have a sense of how long it takes you. And there's no natural connection. So people who are project-oriented always tend to be late. The projects always tend to, they don't care if the project takes longer because it's the project that's important. The time-oriented person is going to be really stressed if the project is taking longer than they expected. A project-oriented person will always think there's plenty of time to do things, and then they don't care if there isn't. You know what I mean? And so time stress is a really big stressor for a lot of people, because if a time-oriented person has a party that starts at 6, they expect everybody to be there at 6 because they are respectful of time and the time of others, so they would always be on time. Does that mean, or when they're not on time, it would be disrespectful. For a project-oriented person, the party starts at 6, and that 6 is a large window of time. And so if they show up at 6:15 or 6:30, it's like, but I'm here, right? That's the point of the event. The event was what was important, not the time that it started, if that makes any sense.
Right. So that is just so amazing to me, because I'm always saying, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that this would take so long. And I really don't have a good grasp about how long things will take. I think 5 minutes is this long. And in my head, it turns out to be 15. And so I love knowing that I'm a project-oriented time person.
Yeah. It's so common for a project-oriented person to think, okay, I got half an hour to pick up my child. I can do this project real quick. And then they're waiting an extra hour because they haven't finished the project yet. And then they feel so terrible because, oh no, I'm a terrible parent. I totally didn't pick them up at the right time. And I had no idea. I thought it had only been 5 minutes. It's been an hour. Yeah, it's very different.
That's crazy. Well, Chani, we are about out of time, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You've shared a wealth of knowledge and just opened up a whole new realm of possibilities of looking at the world that I'm so excited about, and I know our listeners are too. Can you tell us how we can get a hold of you if our listeners want to learn more about this and take some of your classes or whatever else you have to offer?
Yeah, right now we're primarily on Facebook. So if you go to our Facebook page, Chords of Light, we do have a website. The website is not, it got hacked a few weeks ago.
Oh, so
And so
sad.
it's horrible. I mean, I guess read through the bad links. We're working to fix it as fast as we can, but until it's fixed, our website's not going to be a good resource. So look for us on Facebook. We have the ability, anyway, we have some courses that we're preparing and launching. I have one that's on shielding that I already have, and that's just about working with your subconscious brain to tell it how to manage other people's stuff, their emotions, the energies and things. And then I have a course on identifying overwhelm, which will help with goal setting if you can figure out what's causing the disconnect. And so that's what that course is about. And then we have a membership group where we teach classes every month about different subjects, because we want to touch all areas of your life and support all of them. This month, because it's November, it's about service, finding your signature service, because everyone has a way that they just love to serve. And if you know that, it makes you happier. So.
Oh, how neat. That's fabulous. And you've also got a gift for our listeners today. So, we're going to link to some of your videos. Is that right?
Yes. We have a free connection style video series. And so it takes you through each of the 3 connection styles, the vision, the mind, and the heart, and goes more in depth on those. We also have a PDF file you can download from that series that kind of is a quick reference. So if you want to know what words are important, where their eyes go, things like that, it's all there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing and for being on today. It's been really great.
Thank you. I'm excited. I've been following you for a while, so it's fun. Fun to.
Awesome. Well, have a great day.
All right, you too.
Goodbye, everyone.